Welcome back to Derry Public Radio. Reporting from the basement of the Derry Civic Center, this is CM Alexander with the news. All month long, the Aladdin Theater is celebrating their favorite bee movies of all time. This weekend is dedicated to Queen of the Bees herself, Lily Kavanaugh Sawyer. Get your tickets for Death's Darling, Blaze, and Last Train to Hangtown. I've got tickets for all three because there's no way I'm missing a chance to see the Queen rule her territory. You're listening to Derry Public Radio. This is Derry Public Radio. Welcome back to Derry Public Radio, a bi-weekly Stephen King Book Club podcast. I'm one of your hosts, CM Alexander, alongside Joshua Kahn.
Hey, everybody.
Benjamin Graham.
What's up, constant readers?
And today we are covering The Never-Ending Story.
Actually, so close.
Yeah, kind of.
That's what I kept thinking. But we are actually covering The Talisman, where we will be talking about the events through the chapter Wolf, and Josh is leading our discussion.
I sure am. Quick shout out to Edward Serbone for selecting this for our Patreon selection series.
Yay.
This is one of those books that I've wanted to do on the show, so the fact that somebody else wanted it enough that they wanted it for Patreon, I'm super excited. I've read this once before. How many times and how long ago have you guys read it?
Same, and it was probably like late high school, like late teens, early 20s area.
Yeah, I read it in high school as well, but apparently I had also listened to the audiobook before at some point, because when I went to Audible to download the audiobook, I already had it and it was finished. So, bonus.
Yeah.
Ben, what do you think of the audiobook guy?
Frank Muller?
Every sentence that he delivers in exactly this cadence.
I have a different perception of Frank Muller's voice because I always listen to audiobooks on 1.5 to 2 times speed. It makes a huge difference. Personally, I like Frank Miller a lot. I think he has a good voice for King books.
Yeah.
It's very controlled. It's the same cadence every time. I prefer reading this. For some reason, lately, I've been reading and listening to all of our books. I don't know why.
That's what a crazy person would do.
Yeah, things have been weird lately.
Yeah, that all tracks. Am I alone in forgetting that the beginning chunk of this book is real slow and repetitive? Am I alone here?
I think it does take a little bit to pick up, but it's just the nature of a fantasy story.
That's, yeah.
I think.
It's very Lord of the Rings with like the world building and really taking its time that way. All right, well, let's dive into The Talisman. So it is September in 1981. We meet Jack Sawyer, a.k.a. Travelin' Jack, who is 12 years old and staying at the Alhambra Inn and Gardens in New Hampshire with his mom, Lily Kavanaugh Sawyer, the Queen of the Bees, having been a movie star for 2 decades. And his dad, Philip, died in a hunting accident a few years prior. His uncle, Morgan Sloat, his father's former business partner, has been calling nonstop, so Lily has taken them from California to New York and finally to here, New Hampshire, where Jack Sawyer believes the noiseless passivity of this place is killing him. Travelin' Jack, guys, what are your thoughts right off the top?
Well, honestly, my first thoughts aren't for the characters. It's for the setting.
Yeah.
Because the Alhambra becomes kind of important. It's our first view of the twin nature of our world and the territories. It just feels like the end of the world.
Yeah.
It feels like you're right up against the cliffs of, well, the sea, which they are, literally. But it just feels so desolate and empty because it's this like summer town that they have come to in the winter months or in the fall, whenever it is. It reminds me a lot of Fun World.
Yeah, absolutely. Jack he's dealing with the fact that he feels like his whole world is falling apart. His mom's not telling him what's going on. We find out that his uncle, well, not really his uncle, but a guy he calls his Uncle Tommy, died in a hit and run.
I'm sorry. The way that is foreshadowed, or well, it's not even foreshadowed.
The way it's just dropped.
It was really cool reading though, because he thinks about his Uncle Tommy, and then like the author's note is, well, he would find out in a few hours that at that moment Uncle Tommy was dead.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
This whole first chapter feels so jumbled, like Jack feels, like he feels lost, and it's all of this exposition being dumped on you all at once, and it makes you feel that like kind of dreamy loneliness that he feels.
His relationship with his mom, though, the type of mom she is, feels like a kind of what you immediately imagine when you think of a single mom who has, it's just been her and her kid the whole time. She kind of treats him like another adult.
They're like the Hartsfords. Yeah, I totally, what? No, did I read that wrong?
The Hartsfields?
Am I thinking of a different?
You're mentioning Brady and Deborah.
Yeah. Am I remembering that book wrong? Or it's been a while, guys. What are we talking about?
What's funny is that I also drew a parallel to another terrible family, and it was Todd Bowden and his mom.
What?
I'm being entirely facetious. I am just fucking around. What?
The casual, like, if Jack had called his mom Monica Baby, I would have been like, yeah, all right.
Oh. That's
the
fair.
casual, like that.
That's way more fair than the thing I said.
And Jack is feeling alone until he meets Speedy Parker, who is the maintenance guy here at the Alhambra. And their relationship is very, very simple at first. Like, at first, it's just this person makes Jack feel like he's not alone. And really, that's all Jack needs right now. And he's met Speedy. He had a quick interaction with him and liked him a lot. And then the next day, he has like a big panic attack. And this is the first real mystical thing we get in this book, where the sand beneath his feet starts swirling around and opening, and a voice comes out and tells him that Tommy's false teeth flew out of his head when he was hit by the van, and he full on freaks out. As we all would.
Makes sense.
But Speedy is the person that he wants to talk to about this. And I thought that was really interesting.
That portal weirded me out something awful. Because it took me a minute to realize whether it was being literal or not.
Yes.
And yeah, it's being literal. A big portal is opening up in the sand.
I'm not trying to do a shameless plug, but this whole first section, as we're getting to know this place and Jack and his mom and Speedy, actually reminds me of our Girl Underground RPG on our Patreon.
A little bit,
Did you do that on purpose?
No.
Okay.
Not at all.
It's very...
You guys created those characters.
That you built is the twinner of this book.
That is an aggressively unfair compliment. I don't deserve that. Obviously, he doesn't wait for the portal to suck him in. He just sprints off and tears through the hotel like a madman. But he has a memory of when he was 7 years old and almost kidnapped. But we're going to put a pin in that and come back to it a bit later.
Yeah, he ends it with like, oh yeah, those guys, they probably didn't turn into monsters like I remember. And you're like, wait, hold on, go back to that.
And then he just moves on. And this is the moment where I realized, because I was on kind of the same page with you, Ben, of was this sand devil a real thing or not? And this is when he realizes that the voice that was talking to him was Morgan Sloat's. Do you guys want to take a shot at describing Morgan Sloat?
A real piece of shit. We don't really know hardly anything about him until a little bit later in this. He is Jack's deceased father's business partner. They went to college together, and he's described as just this guy that nobody really understood or liked. And we'll talk about it more, I'm sure, but Jack's dad, Philip, somehow makes this friendship with him, and they end up just really sticking it out together and forming this agency. They represent actors and stuff, different talents. And Morgan is we're led to believe he's like more of the business end driving force. Like he's got the mind for, we have a company, we have to have profits, and that's sort of his end, while Jack's dad took care of more of the people side of things.
There's a quote, I didn't write it down and I should have, that was when he describes Morgan Sloat. He says something to the effect of, he was the kind of person that never believed defeat ever needed to be gracious. And I was like, yeah, all right.
And that is the perfect way to describe him as we interact with him more and more throughout this.
we come to learn how fucking ruthless he is. It is not until later, but the story of how he's talking about how proud he is of the work he's done, and his example is just being a slumlord.
Yeah.
This dude sucks. He's
the fucking worst.
Maybe my least favorite king villain yet.
Really?
Because he's a landlord.
Do you remember when I've commented on The Mist and how Mrs. Carmody's character fills me with rage that I can barely deal with, and sometimes I just have to stop and walk away and do something else? This book has a lot of those things in it, and not in a bad way, but just people and circumstances that you're like, King just wants to hurt me.
Yeah, this is him at peak, just writing shitty people. It is amazing.
I fucking love it. But the opposite of shitty people, Speedy. Jack seeks out Speedy after all of this because he's not sure how Speedy can help, but he knows Speedy can.
I really like the first, like, you guys are right, this book does take its time, but at the same time, we have some really crazy stuff in it, like, instantly. And Speedy is one of those things because the way that Jack takes to him so quickly, and just, it's like he has this intuition that he can trust this guy and he should seek him out is, I don't know, it's just a cool bit. It was one of the first times when I was reading King as, like, I think more aware of his world building than I ever had been before. This was that book for me.
And Speedy gives the impression, well, we get evidence a bit later that there's a reason that Jack should feel a bit familiar to him. But he runs up and finds Speedy, and Speedy calls him Travelin' Jack. That's the first time we get that nickname. And he calls him that, and it feels kind of familiar to him. He really likes it. And he's like, follow me. We'll go have a chat. And on the way, he riffs a song that is what is the adventure to come is going to be. At this point, I was like, who the fuck is this guy? Because the song is about how he has to return to California and return again and save the kingdom. But it doesn't make any sense to Jack.
Yeah, the Speedy Parker is the Gandalf of this story. He's the inciting incident that he goes, hey, you gotta get out of here. Adventures afoot.
And that's about all the information he gives him, despite having much more information than that.
He straight out is like, hey, I'm going to tell you all I can, except for the stuff I can't. Deal with it.
Even just explaining currency would have been nice.
Yeah.
when he eventually tells him about the talisman, and he's like, I don't know what a talisman is. And Speedy's response is the 80s version of, Google it. I don't know. Like, that's essentially how he responds. So ridiculous. But here we find out they met in California before, because all the memories of the kidnapping attempt come back to Jack. Do either of you want to talk about the kidnapping?
One day in California, Jack was just like casually, he says he doesn't even know where he was going. It was such an unimportant moment of the day when an 80s PSA plays out in front of us. And a guy in a car rolls up and literally unfolds his hand and has a Tootsie Roll offering candy to Jack. And Jack, knowing that it is a bad idea, knowing that this is like, oh, this is exactly what I'm told not to do, gets grabbed. And a guy in a white suit and this other guy try to drag him into this car. And as they do, he sees them changing.
They're sort of morphing into maybe animal parts.
Their eyes start turning yellow. One of them has a claw instead of a hand.
Yeah.
Very low men.
Yeah.
These are Tahin for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And then Speedy runs out and he's like, hey, get away from that kid. And then they run away.
And some other guy who I think lives in the neighborhood and was going for a walk or something is like, oh my God, kid, are you okay? Do you know those guys who just tried to kidnap you? And he's like, where's the black guy who helped me? And there is no one there. The other guy did not see Speedy. It's like only Jack could see him, which is interesting too.
So we're in Speedy's shack where he has tons of nudies on the wall because this is pre-internet. And amongst all of these tastefully, I'm sure they're tasteful, nude photos is what looks like a postcard of a place that seems so out of place in this area. And Jack's staring at it and he's like, where is that? And when Speedy says it's called the Territories, he says, I knew it before he said it. And that's the part that like gives me goosebumps every time. That first connection when he's like, I know this place. Because up until now, he's just kind of referred to the daydreams and these that he had when he was a kid, but he hasn't had as much as an adult.
Yeah, his mom basically admonished them out of him, saying, no, that people that can't recognize reality from daydreams are going crazy. So cut it out.
Yeah, Jack, I think we said this at the top, but Jack is 12 years old now, and a lot of the things that he is going to be recalling that he experienced when he was like 6 or 7 years old.
Yeah. During their conversation, Speedy pulls out a green bottle, takes a drink of something, and vanishes in front of Jack a little bit, and then comes back to being solid, and then doesn't address it.
I'm confused about how he disappeared a little bit. Did he just like take another drink?
He just took a little nip.
No, I assumed it was just he went dim for a second. It was just not a full flip because, well, we don't find it out today, but you don't need the wine.
Right.
Yeah.
So I assume it was just like a trick of the eyes.
I couldn't remember if you could not quite flip or not.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
I mean, you could probably stop a flip partway through when you change your mind. Don't
I like
flip
that
all
it's
the way.
called flipping.
It's very simple, but it really
Very
pulls
effective
it across.
distinction. Yeah.
When you do that, it's called a fakie.
I whipped a fakie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or nose grind.
Whip a shitty.
It's whip a 50-50 shitty freaky. I don't know.
We are all skateboarders,
obviously. Yeah. Join us next week for guest Tony Hawk joining us for Talisman Part 2. Jack goes back to the room and intercepts a call from Morgan calling his mom, and he eavesdrops on the conversation. And this is where we find out Lily is dying. It's not just something that Jack thinks about. She is actively dying. She's very sick. And Sloat is saying, I'm going to come out. You're going to sign over the whole company. I'll give him a salary for the rest of his life. He'll be well taken care of, but I built this empire. It is mine. And Lily's not fucking having it because she knows the kind of person that Sloat is.
Everything he interacts with, he assumes he did all on his own and that he owns. And I hate him so much.
Yeah, it is like the perfect caricature of like, when was this book written? Early 80s, right?
Yeah.
Because, yeah, it is like
Yeah.
peak Reaganism.
Yeah.
Like, this is mine. I earned it by hurting all of those people.
Very Wall Street.
Yeah, it sucks.
In a book full of real punchable people, Sloat is really outdoes the rest of the people we meet really with punchability.
And there gets to be two of him.
Can we actually take a second to talk about Lily, though?
Yes,
Yeah, absolutely.
Because she's awesome, right?
She's complicated.
Yeah, that's because she is like running away from these problems, and the way she's handling it is not great, like,
Not healthy for her son.
or herself.
No. And you get the sense that she is trying to protect him and herself, but not, maybe she's sick enough that she's not quite making the choice she would otherwise make if she felt better.
Yeah, the thing I come back to is the obvious doom that she has accepted because like she has started smoking. She had quit smoking for a long time, and as they have moved across the country, she has picked up smoking again. And by the time they're at the Alhambra, she is smoking filterless, like black lung cigarettes. And it just adds this very sad, like, finality to what is happening.
And she's lost her perception. We see that when her and Jack are having dinner later, and she ends up offending the waiter, being kind of
in a moment
rude.
I still fucking love.
Yeah, no, it's
Still
an awesome
great, yeah.
moment.
Because what is it that she says?
An elementary martini.
Yeah, and like,
And he's like,
gives this
Madam?
very
He doesn't know
like
what that is.
Hollywood answer,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that is charming from the outside.
Right. That
But as a
involves-
server, would make you want to throw something in her
Oh,
face.
absolutely.
Well, and Jack notices, like, he could tell that the waiter was put off. And he's like, normally she would notice that. Like, she was very good at reading people and understanding how they felt. And she's lost that.
Yeah.
She's just not herself.
Because she was famous, but she was never out of this world famous. She always treated people well.
Yeah, she was nominated for an Oscar, and that was like the highlight of her career, and
Yeah.
like she was just genuinely happy about. I just love this character,
And it was at the Alhambra Inn that they watched the Oscars where she didn't win.
And where Jack was conceived.
It's- the King does a really good job of making you care
Yes.
about Lily, so that when you find out that the purpose of the quest
You're on board.
is to save her, you're like, yeah, cool.
And it's not just to save her, because Jack goes to Speedy and we finally get our quest that Jack has to travel to the territories because
Lord.
Oh,
Deloessian.
yes.
Yeah, I remembered that name.
That's the name.
That's the name I can remember.
Laura Deloessian, the queen of the territories, who is also very sick because they are twinners. And this is the first glimpse we get of twinners and how that works.
It's interesting, too, because Speedy is explaining what twinners are to Jack, and that his mom is one, his dad is one. And Jack's like, do I have a twinner? And he gives him this look, and he's like, no, you're different. I didn't remember why he doesn't have one. Also, we've speculated on Jack as being a twinner of someone several times. We are wrong.
Yeah, that is fair.
Yeah.
The thing that I forgot about twinners is that not everybody has one, that it's 1 in 100,000 because the
Should we
territories are
explain what
smaller.
twinners
Yeah.
are for the people that we're just assuming baseline
Sure,
knowledge?
yeah.
Twinners, of course, are people from the other world that are somehow cosmically linked. They are somehow the same essence of person, but in two different worlds. And usually it seems when one thing happens to one in one world, a similar or way worse thing happens in the other world.
Yeah. The twinners, like, they might not die at the same time, but they might die within a week of each other, say. And he explains that not everybody, but people who figure out how to travel between the worlds, if you have a twinner, it's way easier because you already have a body in both worlds. So those people can travel much easier than Jack will.
Which I'm still wrapping my head around.
Yeah, because when the characters travel with twinner, they don't replace the twinner, right?
Well, that's what I'm trying to wrap my head around, because obviously Jack doesn't, but much, much later, where I read ahead.
We'll talk about that
Yeah.
next week. Yeah, I don't think we have enough information here.
To know
In
one way or
this
the
section.
Other. Yeah.
This is one of those books that the rules are going to get doled out slowly across this journey.
You have to study this book. You have to reread it because it builds so much and so many things that are present in other works.
So they go down to the beach and Speedy's explaining all this and he gives him the bottle and tells him to take a drink and he'll cross over. He drinks and he flips over into the territories and the world is the same, but it's so different. There's a deep, gorgeous blue sea. There's a blue chambray sky.
No industrial revolution has taken place and
Yes.
polluted the earth.
And he gets harassed by a seagull for a minute and he moves on.
Very unnervingly large seagull.
A seagull the size of an eagle, I believe is how he describes
which is actually
Which
pretty
is
cool
just a
because
seagull.
early
Sorry, I was trying. You can combine the names.
You really
but
went for it, and I'm
they're-
proud of
They're
you.
the same.
I love that. Amazing job, CM.
Oh, Thank you, guys. Thank you. I needed a win, and that was it.
Oh, Seagle. Oh God. So he travels around a little bit. He walks maybe 150 feet. He guesses, and when he flips back over, he's a half a mile away from where he started.
Which is an amazing detail about this.
Yes.
I love that it's so subtle, but when he first flips over into the territories, he looks out at the ocean and can clearly delineate the curvature of the earth.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a subtle way of noting that, as we find out later, the territories are just smaller than here.
Also, did you guys feel the way I felt when he very quickly and easily understood everything about math and geography?
What happened?
When Jack is like figuring out like, oh, if I travel this far, this is
Oh,
what did he? Yeah,
He's a smart kid.
I would have never known. I'd be like, oh no, I'm further.
I feel like Jack gains special powers every chapter. His
okay.
super math powers, but then later we find out for really no reason he has a gift for mimicry. Just that comes out of nowhere. I feel like
Yeah, Jack is like Golden Age Superman and just kind of do whatever needs to happen in the scene.
Speedy tells him that what he's looking for is in the territories. He has to get to California. That's where the talisman is. And he has to bring it back, and it will save the queen. And by saving the queen, it'll save his mom.
And the only thing he can tell him about this object is to not drop it. Speedy.
Good note. That's a very important rule, though. Don't drop the thing that saves the world.
Did anyone tell fucking Roland about about his fucking horn? Listen to the Dark Tower 7 episode in 10 years.
When he gets back, he can't find Lily anywhere.
Were you guys, I'm sorry, just he gets back and he's like, all right, I have to go on this journey. He accepts that, and I accepted that he accepted it. But I was shocked when he's like, and I have to convince my mom to let me go. Because I was anticipating him kind of just taking off, like leaving her a note maybe so that she can't stop him or argue. But he's going to explain to her what he needs to do. I was like, oh, okay.
I felt like that was the right choice for Jack, for the relationship we have that we see with him and his mom.
It felt very, for a scene that happens in a diner or a jam shop or whatever it is, it feels regal. Is that just me?
Right, yeah.
Because
a lot about their relationship feels like what we know in the territories.
Yeah, like he is coming to the queen to say, I am, setting out on this quest in your name.
And a 12-year-old boy in that situation would be seen probably as more capable of doing something like that and being on his own and not seen as much of a child.
And Jack even mentions after he sits down and he tells her that he has to go and doesn't know when he'll be back. And he realizes that she somehow knows. Like there's a piece of her that knows everything he's saying is true and he has to do this.
Yeah, twinners aren't necessarily conscious of one another or the other worlds, but there's like a deep subconscious connection that they are aware of on some level. I thought it was interesting too when because she's kind of resistant. She's sort of being sarcastic with him, like, oh, really? Yeah, you got to do this thing. And he says, hey, remember, Dad, you would think he was in a room. You'd swear he was there.
Yeah.
And you would go into that room and he wouldn't be there. And like weird stuff like that. And that's when we get her referencing him as a similar name to Traveling Jack too.
She calls him Wandering Jack, and then she corrects herself and like, no, your dad called you Traveling Jack. That's what he was. That's how we found out that that's where that name originated. And so for Speedy to know that is just another level of we should definitely trust Speedy.
Yeah.
Because he knew my dad, obviously. Mm-hmm. So he convinces her, he packs a backpack.
I'm sorry. It didn't bother you guys what this kid was. My inventory is like, can we put a flashlight in there, like a pocket knife?
For a 12-year-old kid, I was like, "Yep, this makes sense."
I was so upset.
Absolutely. If I had been 12 years old, trekking across the country, my book bag would have been like 3 Ninja Turtles shirts and a
Yes.
Game Boy.
Yeah, definitely a
And
Game
mine
Boy,
too,
a pack of Oreos.
But as an adult reading it, I hurt so much because like, Jack, pack something useful.
Turn back, you big dumb idiot. Get a survival kit.
Yeah, bring some
Yes.
granola. You're gonna need calories.
On his way out, he runs into Speedy, who gives him a road atlas so that he doesn't get lost. And that's when Speedy also tells him, like, you have to go on foot as much as possible, because if you tried to go on a plane and you flipped, you just fall to your death. Which is great.
Terrifying.
I am not being smart. I need your guys' help.
Okay.
I get that an airplane would be scary because he's like, can I fly? And he's like, hell no, you can't fly. You flip when you're in a plane and you flip in the air. Makes sense. Why can't he take a bus?
Yeah.
He hitches rides.
He doesn't have
He's
the money.
in a vehicle. Why? Okay.
And
let me
he'll be-
let me rephrase this. Why didn't Lily put him on a fucking bus or drive? Why does he have to do this all by himself?
Buses
What's
are
happening?
easy to track.
That's true.
Almost there. I need a little more, but keep working on it. Let's move on.
And there'd be so many witnesses. Like, so many people would see this kid traveling by
Norman would
himself.
find him right away. What book
More-
are we reading?
Good pull, Ben.
Yeah.
Nicely done.
He's not Rosa.
He'd have to take a bus without seeing where it went.
Yeah.
And that creates all sorts of problems. And then you find a painting, and let's move on. And Speedy gives him the atlas, and he also gives him a finger pick, an ivory finger pick, and basically says, when you get to the castle, find the guard with a scar on his face, show him this, then he'll know that I sent you.
And then he tells him everything he needs to understand about the customs of the territory so that he doesn't
Yep.
stand out.
The
He
important stuff.
explains
Listen,
the currency.
your pants are going to be different.
And he goes on his way. We've already talked about Sloat and, you know, how all this came to be. There's one note in this Sloat interlude that I really wanted to mention as I was talking about how much of an asshole Sloat is. I wrote, Sloat resents how the alphabet works, because when they name the business Sawyer and Sloat,
Yeah.
despite Sloat and Sawyer being Phil's first suggestion.
Everything about this dude is so like petty and
Mhm.
pathetic. Who is it? It's Buster. Buster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like a very
Persecutors.
smart Buster Keaton.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, because that's the other thing is he is a slime ball and a piece of shit, but he's incredibly competent.
Yes.
Yeah, he's too competent to not infuriate me
Yeah.
constantly.
And we find out that Sloat's master plan is he's going to take over the territories when the queen dies. So we get that last malicious, like, there's no redeeming quality for this guy.
The also ending on him firing a guy and thinking, man, this guy's gonna kill himself. Cool.
I was wondering if he was going to make that guy kill himself or
I
not.
kind of took that as that.
Oh, I just assume. Well, I mean, he's gonna in a roundabout way make him kill himself.
He's okay with feeling responsible for
Yes.
it. He's like, yeah, my actions are going to make him kill himself. Good job, me.
Yeah.
Successful day at work.
Yeah, check
Yeah.
that off the to-do list. Then I've got a dinner
Ugh.
appointment. Fuck this guy. So Jack has flipped. All of his clothes have changed.
He didn't. It's fine. It's fine. He didn't know. I'm glad the book explained this because as soon as he noticed that his clothes were different, I was like, were they different the first time he flipped? And it was like, oh, he didn't notice that before. I'm going to make this argument
distracted by
again.
a
I
Seagle.
feel like
I'm
it
going to
does-
make this argument again. It's a book.
I was
you can
gonna
put it
say-
anywhere. You can talk about him noticing his clothes in the first flip.
No, there are a few. I don't know what the second thing you're going to talk about, but I do remember having that thought several times. Oh, the money, right?
yeah.
Of being like, oh, and also he had a bunch of sticks in his pocket. Okay, cool.
CM, you wouldn't notice your clothes changed if you were being chased by a sea eagle.
Seagle.
Seagle. He winds up in the Queen's Pavilion and he sees all these people milling around and he sees these guards in front of the palace and there's no way he can get past until a ruckus breaks out and he sees this guard captain with the scar and he goes up to him and pulls out the pick and it's no longer a pick. It's been turned into a long tooth with a pattern engraved in it. And Captain Farron does not believe that was given to him right away.
Yeah, it takes some
Very aggressive
convincing for him. He's a rough dude.
Yeah.
I think a fair dude, but a rough dude.
Yeah. And he refers to when Jack is trying to describe Speedy, and he's like, "Oh, Parkus."
Why? I'm sorry. Okay.
Jesus, Sam.
I'm
So
This book is
aggressive.
making me angry. I love it, but it's making me mad. Why didn't Speedy say, by the way, tell him Parkus sent you? For fuck's sake.
Listen,
Why are
If
you
you-
the me in this episode?
if you have you ever had just a million things you needed to tell someone, and then they've left and you've only told them 3? I
They-
have.
They still
done
would
it to
have been
Ben.
3 useful, important things.
Yeah, he don't fly,
Don't drop the...
don't drop the talisman,
Oh my God.
and save your mom. Those are the 3 important things. When he convinces Farron that they're what he's here to do, he says, "All right, we're gonna do role play. I'm gonna pretend you're my bastard child that I hate, and I'm just gonna yell at you and drag you through the kingdom." And he's like, "All right, I'm an actor," and drags him through the castle.
It's
and we
so
get,
good. I actually love
It's
this
so
part.
fucking great.
The lengths that almost called him Jake. All my hard name work. All of the like making himself cry on cue, just out of nowhere. Awesome.
He's selling the bit. And they get inside the castle, and we get this very cool Eyes of the Dragon-esque
Yes.
secret
Yeah.
passage. And he finally sees his mom, but not his mom. He sees the resemblance, and just she's laying in a bed in a coma, and he just stares at her for a while. And it's like, now that I've seen this, his resolve is doubled. It's wonderful. So Jack reveals his quest, and Farron says, "Let's get you out of here before Morgan arrives, because you don't want to be here when he gets here."
Yeah, so this is where we also find out why Speedy gave Jack that funny look when he's like, do I have a twinner? And he was like, no, you're different. The queen and her husband, which was Jack's dad's twinner, had a child who died at like 6 weeks or 6 months or something,
6 weeks.
as an infant. And Jack, I almost said remembers, but he was also an infant. But he recalls his mom telling him about a time when she and Phil and Morgan were all hanging out at their house, and she went out to check on Jack after Morgan had excused himself to use the restroom and came back, and he wasn't breathing. And so they raced him to the hospital, and he ended up living, but that's when his twinner died. And we also find out that Morgan tried to smother him.
Yes. They pick up the role play, drag him through the kitchen. Very funny scene in the kitchen. And they're just about home free when we meet Osmond. Do either of you want to describe Osmond?
Holy shit. Osmond is fascinating.
Yes, absolutely.
Osmond is, I may have the physical descriptions wrong because all of the shit he does is so wild that the way I pictured him, because he's like described as very tall and like lanky, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And his mannerisms are
He's
a
got
lot.
pizzazz.
He has pizzazz and then some.
He's
And
a real showman.
The problem is he's a real dick.
He comes up and he finds out, he's looming over Jack and like boring into Jack's soul just by staring at him and being terrifying because he's also holding a bullwhip.
With metal spurs on the end of the several ends of the whip.
And he's just like staring Jack down and being like, who are you? And Jack feels the need almost to blurt it out. Cause he's like, that's what kids do. They tell everything. But he holds it in long enough. And Farron is able to distract him. And is it before or after the Kingsland that Jack gets one across the back?
It's before.
Yeah. Just out of nowhere.
For being bad.
Yeah, for being there, basically.
Yeah, because he accuses Farron of letting his bastard in to steal silver and whatever.
Mm-hmm. And my favorite part is just Jack turning with just saying he had just enough time to think, I know where that's going, before feeling it rip into his back.
Oh. We also find out that Jack notices that this is the yellow-eyed kidnapper that we referenced earlier. Thankfully, a guy turned over a cart and killed his son on accident, so Jack took the focus off Jack. This passage is dark.
Yes, that scene tells you exactly what Osmond is like because
And what the territories are like.
Yeah.
He doesn't give one flying fuck that this guy's kid is dead. And the guy has a moment where it's like, oh, he didn't think that he heard him, that his child died in this accident, so he repeated it. And it's just so dark and miserable.
Yeah, and Osmond beats that man to death in the street while laughing.
Yeah. All because his cart overturned and he spilled the Kingsland Ale, which is the best ale in the kingdom.
Well, and Morgan's
on his way.
And you know how quickly he comes down that road. If he comes around a bend and there's a blockage, you better hope he dies and is not just injured.
Yes. So they leave and they head to Outpost Road, or the Western Road, because this is what will take Jack west. Farron is going to take him as far as he can and then send him on his way. And they see a sea of drunks as they get closer, because people have just been drinking out of puddles. Classic territories. And Farron says, all right, we've come this far. We have to stay here. Travel west, but if you hear Morgan's diligence, it is the loudest thing in the world. It's like 13 horses and a massive carriage. You'll hear it coming. Get as far off the road as you can, because Morgan can smell when something is wrong. Oh, we should also mention Morgan Sloat in our world, Morgan of Orris in the territories.
Yeah.
Very convenient that he gets to have the same name in both places.
Hey, you guys?
Yeah.
If we had twinners, what would their names be?
I think mine would be Jake.
I think mine would be Bimbo. Nope. Nope. We're going to take that again. Bean. Just Bean.
Bean. Perfect.
Yeah.
One of my favorite characters in Ender's Game. So Farron gives him a coin, sends him on his way, and on the road hours later, he hears the diligence coming, and he moves out into the woods, and it passes by, and it's horrifying.
Mm-hmm.
He sees the massive, like, it's Morgan's guards first, then it's this diligence, and as it passes, he can just see clearly that Morgan turned and looked at him as he passed. And he's like, what the fuck? Did he see me? Did he not see me? Oh, I think I got away with it. And then he gets Evil Deaded.
Okay.
Yup, exact thought.
So the vines of these, or the roots of these trees, or vines that are part of these trees, are about to rip him apart. And they have his bottle, and that's all moving. And he thinks, why didn't Farron warn me about this? And then he thinks, oh, he must not have known. No, really? Anyway, we don't have to talk about it.
He probably knew.
I do like, because they do kind of hint at that. He says, well, maybe Farron just hasn't gone this far west, or is that later on?
No,
because he says
that's there.
Yeah, because later on he says, like, because Farron had said, once you get past the outpost, no one has ever traveled past the outpost.
See, I can only think, because I've never gone into like an area where there's quicksand, but I do still know it exists, even if I haven't gone that far west. I'm wondering if he just assumed Jack would know, like the woods were dangerous in that specific way. So he
does tell Jack to travel in our world as much as possible. I think
Speedy does, right?
Yeah, Speedy does, in order to like be
But maybe
safer.
say because the trees will murder you. That's useful. Anyway, this is why he ends up flipping back, because he's about to die, and he manages to get the juice and takes a swig.
And he ends up in a much shittier place.
Yeah.
Ooh.
He ends up in New York's Derry, Oatley, having spilled a good chunk, a third of the bottle, so now he has even less. Or he only has a third left now after he spilled so much. He keeps hitching. He winds up in Oatley. And as he's looking for work, because that's part of what he's been doing, hitching, working at this place on like a farm for a day.
The less we talk about the hitching, the better.
Yeah.
It's what you think it is.
Yeah.
It's
Oh, the whole bunch of gay panic.
Yes. Yep. So Jack finds a sign that says "Help Wanted" outside the Oatley Tap, and he'll sure wish he never saw that sign. Do either of you want to talk about the Oatley Tap?
It is a dive bar that is deceptively not busy when Jack agrees to kind of a shitty deal about work and board. and it is something that is very happening on the weekends. It's all these blue-collar workers getting off work, and they come in, they drink pretty hard, and then they call it a night. They go home so they can get up for work the next morning. Problem is, there's a lady there who's nice, and I'm not going to spend 5 minutes talking about how no woman wants to be hit, despite the words in this book.
Yeah, boy howdy.
Anyway, she's a domestic violence sufferer. She lives with the owner, and he's an unfair piece of crap and kind of screws Jack over. And there's this sense that he keeps telling Jack, like, hey, you don't have to stay on, just stay over the weekend and you'll make a bunch of money because we'll be really busy, and then I'll drive you to the next town and you can be on your way. And Jack knows that it's a lie, that he's not going to drive him there. And so we kind of come back with Jack after he's already spent some time here and is explaining that it's been a really rough time. He's been physically abused. He's been berated. There's a creepy guy there, which one of you can...
I think it says at the beginning of the chapter, it has been 60 hours that he has worked at this place. Mm-hmm. And he is he is thinking, now is the time I have to run away.
It feels like 60 days. The way he describes his experience, it seems so long. It's just a really cool way to write that in such a way that makes you feel like this has been an eternity.
This whole scene is the thing I think about when I think about this book, because it stuck with me so hard, and in my memory, it was much longer than this because it feels so much longer.
The phone.
The chapter title, Jack and the Pitcher Plant, it feels just like you're stuck in this place just as much as Jack is.
Yeah.
And he's still being pursued because the phone keeps ringing and no one is there. Until someone is.
Yeah, when, every once in a while they'll answer and yell, fuck off or whatever. Yeah. But when Jack finally answers the phone, it is Morgan's voice saying, get home, Jack. Get home, or you're going to go home in a body bag.
And there's someone nearby who can make that happen. And we meet that Elroy.
Yeah, the Elroy thing. He describes him as Randolph Scott at first, because that's kind of what he looks like.
I got very stressed out every time Jack would have a bad experience, and then he'd think about his pack that he stashed away somewhere, because I kept thinking they're gonna get it and they're not gonna let him go. It made me so anxious. This book makes me very anxious.
Yeah, absolutely. Mostly because he's our hero and you think things should work out so easily, and they never fucking do.
He has no autonomy.
No.
It's terrible.
So funny because earlier in the book, the first day that he heads out, he has the thought of once he got on the road, he thought, boy, all my problems are behind me. And then immediately every problem happens.
Yes.
Wouldn't have happened on a bus. Continue.
A bunch of this happens all at once here at the very end. The Elroy thing, before it's the Elroy thing, grabs him in the bar.
He's been made to be afraid of him because the owner threatens him. He's like, you see that guy over there? He likes little boys.
Yeah, he's been watching you. Mm-hmm. And Smokey comes in. The guy backs off, but only because Smokey needs to beat the hell out of Jack for dropping a keg. And there's a gunshot in the other room. So Smokey runs out. The coast is clear. And he says, it's now or never. Mm-hmm. And so he grabs his stuff, makes a break for it. But Elroy is right there and grabs him, drags him into the bathroom, and then starts transforming. And that is so fucking scary, because I was not expecting a monster to be there.
Because we've had two other descriptions of people transforming, but because of the way they were described, it's just this state of intense anxiety and danger. So you're not sure if he means it literally, he actually saw that. And this is where it becomes a little more, oh, these are weird creatures.
Yes. Luckily, he's able to slip away and drink from the bottle and flip back into the territories. And this is where we learn about Jerry Bledsoe, our favorite character in the book so far. Because when he flips, Jack starts to think about when he was 6 years old. He was playing behind the couch, heard Morgan and Phil talking about the territories and being more a part of how that world works, because Sloat sees what the benefits they can reap.
He sees bringing capitalism to the territories. And he's so shitty about it that this is just... I hate him so much. And it's interesting because Phil's like, you have to be careful what you do there. Like, we can't really interfere with their lives too much because it affects ours. And he's trying to explain. I can't remember the event that happened over. They had like
there
a civil
had been
war for like
a small civil war
for like 3
that
weeks or
like
something.
the king or something had been killed or something. And yeah, it had been a small skirmish, but on our side, it was the day that Germany invaded Poland.
Lasted for years.
So their conflict lasted 3 weeks, and then our side lasted for 6 years. So he's just trying to say, we need to know what we're affecting before we do anything. And this is where Phil also drops that there are other worlds than these. But that's not important right now.
So frustrating.
Yeah.
So frustrating that this is thrown out there and you're like, wait, what?
What did Phil know?
It's so cool because Jack is like, when he hears this, he's like, oh yeah, of course. Like sometimes when I'm over there, I feel like I'm closer to somewhere else. And you're like,
When
God.
you're over there, what? I'm baffled that he remembers a conversation he was half asleep for when he was 6 years old. I don't remember anything when I was 6 years old. And that and I know it's for us, so we understand, but that he can see how butthurt Morgan is over Phil being like, like he's pretending like, oh, Phil, yeah, you're so smart. I'm totally on board. And you're like, oh, dude's going to kill this guy.
Oh, yeah.
First chance he gets.
Absolutely.
So frustrating.
Well, the reason Jerry Bledsoe is important is because he died at the Sawyer and Sloat building one day. A witness saw an electrical panel or something blow up and kill this guy.
He got hit by a ball of lightning.
Yeah. And that's just an example of how traveling can affect something. It caused this guy's death.
Yeah, there's a concern that Jack begins to have that just by flipping, he is causing some sort of disaster or harm just randomly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is this the point where we learn about, what is it?
There's an earthquake in a town.
Some town now.
Yeah, later we find out
Yeah.
there's an earthquake in a town he passed through.
Jack realizes after he flips that he is thinking and hearing and speaking a different language, and he never noticed before.
Yeah, that was the point.
Yeah.
That was like,
Yes.
because
I had a feeling that was what you were talking
because
about.
earlier in the book, like the first time he goes over, he specifically notes that the guy starts the first time he hears language, he's like, oh yeah, I understand that. So we're led to believe, that it's just English.
Mm-hmm.
And then it takes, because it's been weeks at this point,
Or
days.
It's
at
hard
least.
to tell.
It's been weeks. Or been at least a week.
Yeah, and he's just now.
This is one of my favorite scenes also. It's so short, but the market scene. There's so much world building in this market.
Can we just mention briefly on the way to the market? Because he gets a ride with a family who seems really nice, but it reflects many of his hitchhiking experiences without the touchy-feely, where he's got to come up with a story. And he's really nervous to do that in the territory side because even though he can understand and speak the language, he doesn't know, if the meaning is quite the same. So he's concerned about saying the wrong thing. And of course, he does exactly that. And he sees this nice family just get really afraid of him. And they're like, oh, there's some political stuff going on with you and the kingdom and the queen and everything. And we're just simple people, and simple people always get hurt when that happens. You're close enough. Get out of my cart. See ya. And it was sad because we'd seen him go through so much horror. He finally meets somebody nice.
And he's like a pariah, basically.
Yeah. But then, when he gets to the market, first I wanted to rip my hair out, and then he meets a nicer person. The fucking... May I continue?
Yeah,
Can I just go on and
please.
on? Okay. So he gets to this market, medieval style thing you would imagine perfectly. It's what you're picturing. And he recognizes that his money, which is about $22, has turned into literal sticks with these nubs on them. He very wisely is watching people exchange that currency for things because he's starving. And because he had to take off quickly from the bar.
Yeah.
And so he's trying to figure out how to get some food. So he watches a few transactions, and then he goes up, and he'd seen a guy get a slab of meat and bread for like 2 knobs off this stick. And he takes out all of his knobs, all of his sticks, and he holds them up. Yeah, I'm like, okay, you just did this. Why didn't you just break off 2?
Exactly.
And you would have gotten the same amount. So This guy recognizes a sucker when he sees one, and he brings him a much smaller piece of meat, but Jack's like, I'm not going to bitch because it's food and I need it. He takes his stick and he breaks off 3. And Jack obviously probably looks upset and he's like, I could have taken 4. You're lucky. You want to make a deal out of it? You want to make a big deal? And he's like, it just made me so angry for him.
He got. That's on Jack.
It is frustrating, but I actually kind of love this section because of something they say that once he's gotten to this point, he realizes he's started to blend in, even though
it's after that part. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No, that is later. But yeah, when he starts to notice that he's blending in, not because he is not like gaping at everything, but because everyone is.
Yeah.
Because everything's just so bustling.
He's not as worried about acting like everyone else. Yeah. He's just being himself, and he has the most success that way.
The biggest takeaway from this scene is that the rhyming rug vendor is the Stephen King cameo I've been waiting for my whole life.
Yeah.
Because that character fucking rules.
Yeah, he meets one nice guy, a rug vendor, who sells him a mirror that shows him a Pinocchio donkey face when he looks in it.
It's great. I love it.
Yeah, it's very sweet.
And he remembers he had one. Or something.
He had a marble. He had a similarly kind of magical item that he lost when he was a kid. When he was 6.
Yeah. So he's headed out. He's, like Ben said, he is starting to feel kind of a place for himself in this world. And he looks in a stream and he gets a vision of Elroy driving Morgan's diligence coming west, coming after Jack. So his only choice is to drink and flip back into what he now calls the American territories, which I think is awesome.
Yeah.
He's reached Angola by Lake Erie, and he gets a ride from Buddy Parkins, who picks up Louis Farron, is what he goes by.
I love that he keeps the name that Farron gave him.
Yeah.
I think that's very cool.
And notice he flipped in Angola, New York, and he picked him up in Ohio. So it shows the distance between the way time passes is so impossible to keep track of in this book because Jack's not. Right. So why would we? And Buddy just sees, he knows something's up with this kid, but he sees a good kid. He even offers I've got a wife and kid, come home with us, have a couple square meals, whatever. And he politely declines. He has his whole story about how his mom is sick, his dad's dead, and he's going to live with his aunt. And that's the story he gives everybody when he goes. And Buddy notices that he's carrying around a newspaper from Angola and is like, where'd you get that? Oh, it was at the bus station or whatever when I was there. I picked it up. And after he drops them off on this turnpike and he remembers, oh yeah, wasn't there an earthquake in Angola and 5 people died?
Which is not on a fault line, so there should not be an earthquake there.
And so we've finally seen that there are consequences to this flipping a little bit.
Maybe. We don't know for sure because we are very soon meet a character who tells Jack, you can't take all this on yourself.
Yeah. We find out Jack's plan is to head to Springfield because that's where Richard Sloat, Morgan's son, is going to a prep school. And he feels like if he can get to Richard, he can talk Richard into coming with him, and then he won't be alone on this journey anymore. Which, good idea. Probably. If Richard is the kind of kid that Jack remembers him being, I guess.
I can't remember if it is a good idea.
Me either.
I
so don't remember at all.
Oh, we're only quarter of the way through the book. I'm sure this one kid won't become an extremely important character later on. Probably not, though.
So he goes to a mall and buys some new shoes because his shoes are worn off his feet.
I love the interaction he has with these shitty mall kids. He's heading into this mall and he's been on the road for long enough now that he looks like he's been on the road. And so he sees these kids who get out of a car and there's all these girls crowded around this douchebag and they make fun of him, but he sees them and instantly knows he's oh, I'm not one of them anymore. Something really core about me has changed just by being in the territories. And he even says at some point, he doesn't begrudge these kids for being assholes and he doesn't want to get them, but he feels like he knows he could.
He decides to call his mom from a payphone. And that's when we find out that, yes, Morgan did come out there. She sent him packing, telling him it was a waste of time. And before they can wrap up their conversation, the connection gets kind of jarbled. And Morgan's voice comes through, and Morgan calls him a murderer for killing those people and says that he can't run, that he will find him no matter what he does.
Okay, so I want to take... We never talked about, at the very beginning of the book, there was a Seagle watching Jack. Jack was obsessed with this eye that he saw in the Seagle. And when the portal opened on the beach, he kind of associated it with the black of this Seagle eye and something watching him. And of course, the thing is associated with Morgan because Morgan's voice came out of it. Anyway, Morgan's eye was watching out of the bird, and birds lie. And now Morgan is saying
that he caused that earthquake.
Yes.
Oh, so that's why you're thinking.
Holy shit!
Maybe it's not a consequence of.
It's not actually a thing that is. It is a completely arbitrary thing that happened, or maybe Morgan caused it. Who knows?
Yeah.
It just, that's why I feel like Morgan is the liar here, and I feel like Jack is innocent.
That's awesome. Ben, that kicks ass. Yeah, I'm on board. I'm on board 100%. On his way out, he passes a blind black man with a guitar who sounds exactly like Speedy and looks exactly like Speedy. But wait, he doesn't sound like Speedy, and he doesn't look like Speedy. He's Speedy, but he's not Speedy. You guys follow, right?
And his name is Snowball.
Sure.
He sees this man, yes, Snowball, who apparently plays outside this mall for cash. He's got a little tip container where people can throw change. And Jack just word vomits every problem he's ever had to this stranger.
It's so sweet.
It's so good.
Because he is kind to Jack. He's like, I don't know this Speedy, and I don't know what you're talking about, and I don't think that stuff was your fault, and it's gonna be okay, kid. But he says enough specific things that you're like, what's happening? What is this character?
Will you just tell me if you're Speedy or not?
Yeah, I need to know.
Yeah, he keeps doing things that ain't nothing Speedy around here. Wink. And you're like, stop fucking with me, guy.
And Jack's in his word vomiting, he's like, I only have 2 drinks left. I'm not going to have enough to get by. And Snowball's like, hey, man, you don't need that wine. Like, I can smell it on your breath, you drunk kid. You don't need wine. You don't need wine to travel.
Uh-huh.
And then he's like,
wink, wink, wink.
And then he just starts playing a random song until the police show up and they take away this
starts
blind
playing a random
man.
song. Oh, my name's Speedy. And I'm gonna be your best friend. Speedy, why are you singing this song to me? I don't know any Speedy.
Not Speedy around here. But this is one of those moments that I just want. We've all been clamoring for a Talisman adaptation into a film or a series. Like, a lot of people have. And this is one of those scenes that I think would be so hilarious because the cops load him up, and as he's pulling away, Jack's watching him go, and Snowball Speedy turns and like winks at him from the police car and moves on. Like, what is happening? Who are you? But deep down, he knows it's Speedy somehow. So Jack has been hitchhiking some more, and he's at a rest station waiting for the person he got out of the car with to leave so he can safely go back out and hitch a new ride.
He's had a rough go.
Yeah.
Most of the times he hitches.
Yeah.
And he's just about to go back out for a ride when Morgan Sloat's BMW pulls in. And the only escape he can think of is he needs to flip back to the territories. So he's hiding in the woods. He takes a drink, he flips back, and all of a sudden he finds himself in front of a 6'5" figure who is herding cow sheep creatures. And
what does he call them?
Creep.
Slunks. Oh yeah. Creeps.
Creeps,
right.
yes.
That's better.
Oh, he's as good at words as I am.
And he momentarily freezes because he is positive it's the Elroy thing in bib overalls. And the figure turns around and he sees these bright orange eyes and then a surprisingly cheerful smile with a lot of teeth. And we meet Wolf right here and now.
I love him deeply.
Oh, Wolf is the best.
I do too. I prefer.
You said that with some hesitation that makes me worried
Well,
about your next sentence.
I prefer to read about Wolf
than listen.
Yes, because in the audiobook, it's like blah, 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 wolf, wolf, blah, 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 wolf, wolf, wolf. And it's tiring.
I will say the voice of Wolf in my head is not the voice that Frank Muller does.
He doesn't really do any voices.
Yeah, he does.
I
think
would
so.
say he does.
Yeah.
They all sound like Frank Muller.
I guess that's what I mean. I'm not criticizing it because you can tell it's a different character, but it's a cadence.
Do we need to listen to his performance as Osmond to convince you that there's other voices?
That's problematic. So no, we do not.
Yeah.
So Wolf is super excited to meet a new person. He shakes hands with all of the gusto in the world, which made me think that if Wolf did have a twinner, it's Tom Cullen.
Obviously.
Yeah.
You don't have to.
Big Tom Cullen energy, which
Goes
made
without
me
saying.
love him immediately.
Yeah.
He's a werewolf.
Yeah.
Turns into a wolf when he
Yeah,
sees the
and he's a
MOON.
Yes!
The fact that he's a werewolf just fascinates me about the territories.
I love that he says, like, are you a werewolf? And he's like, yeah.
Yeah. He's like, yeah, and I know your dad.
Yeah. He's
Aw.
like, how's Phil doing?
Oh.
What? And he's described as being simple, of course, but he recognizes by Jack's face, he's like, oh man, I'm sorry. He's dead, isn't he? I shouldn't have asked you how he was doing. But this is also where we find out that Wolf had siblings and Morgan stole one of his sisters.
Jesus. Stole some of us. He stole plural.
I don't remember how that plays out, but I can't help but think of like weird human trafficking situation. And I hate this guy.
Yeah. The fact that first of all, he name drops Phil, and then he's like, oh, I'm sorry, Jack. Jack has not said his name.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, how do you know this? And he's like, oh, you smell the same. That's easy. Like, I love that when it's so simple for Wolf, he's like, yeah, duh.
Yes. I agree with you, CM, that this is like my favorite point. This is when Wolf shows up, I think, is the point when the book takes off.
This is the heart of the book.
Yes, absolutely. And I just love, I wish there were slightly more of because we didn't even mention the guys in the sky.
Yeah.
That he just walking down the road, there's a real long segment about him just watching some dudes with wings do a dance.
Just jump off a
and
tower and
talks
do
about how
synchronized
neat
swimming.
it is. It's great.
It's fucking great.
I wish there was more of that.
Yeah.
More monsters, please.
Yes. This section where we're reading ends with Wolf explaining that he also knew Morgan, that Morgan stole some of us, that they knew he was bad, they could sense he was bad. And then Wolf starts howling. And that is where we leave off for this section of the reading. How you guys feel revisiting the Talisman? How is this hitting you?
What a place to leave off. As soon as I got to that part, I was like, dang, like kind of a cool way to end the episode. And then I kept reading. And I think I brought some of my frustration from what they are going to be experiencing next into this episode because it hurts so much.
Do either of you, besides what you've read ahead, CM, do you guys remember much else after this?
I remember
very little.
I remember elements like scenes from a movie, but no real meaning of the book. So I'm going to be along for the ride.
I remember a pit and gargoyles.
I
don't,
that.
So I'm very excited. Yeah.
I remember a Dark Tower reference.
Ooh.
I think, or I'm confusing it with something else. There is like the Talisman, Black House, and there are a few other books around that same time that kind of get like jumbled in my head.
Yeah. I remember like a train or like carts on a track. That's some abstract thing I know is somewhere here.
Well, we'll find out soon enough, because that is it for this episode of Derry Public Radio. As always, thank you for listening. Join us next episode where we will be reading through Part 3 of The Talisman. For Joshua Kahn and Benjamin Graham, I'm CM Alexander, reminding you, be bigger than your burden. Hey everyone, CM Alexander here. Thank you for listening to The Talisman Part 1. We hope you enjoyed it. Let us know what you think of this book so far on our Facebook or Instagram at Derry Public Radio or Twitter at Derry Public, and you can send us an email if you like at derrypublicradio@gmail.com. Don't forget to check out our Etsy store, etsy.com/Derry Public Radio for cool merchandise, Stephen King stuff, and Derry stuff. And if you want more content in between episodes, you can always find extra stuff on our Patreon page. Search Derry Public Radio. We release a special episode every month, and we sometimes release episodes early there. We have all kinds of rewards for every tier. Be sure to check that out. That's all for now, listeners. Goodbye.